They called you cold. Before you even opened your mouth, before you had a single chance to prove yourself, someone in that room had already decided what your silence meant. Arrogant, awkward, uninterested, too much in their own head. And the worst part, nobody asked, nobody wondered. They just filled in the blank, and they filled it with the worst version of you. But psychology has been quietly studying people like you for decades. And what it's found isn't a disorder. It isn't a deficit. It isn't a social flaw that needs to be fixed at some weekend confidence workshop. What it found is something that most people walking this earth never develop. Stay with me. Let's start with what's actually happening inside your brain when you walk into a room full of people. Most people enter a social space and immediately start outputting. Jokes, opinions, small talk, laughter. Their brains are wired to connect through noise. The more they fill the air, the more comfortable they feel. Silence to them is threat. Silence means rejection. Silence means failure. So they talk. About nothing. About everything. Just to keep the silence from closing in. You don't do that. When you walk into that same room, your brain doesn't immediately broadcast. It observes, it catalogs, it runs a full environmental scan before it decides what, if anything, is worth saying. Psychologists have a name for this. They call it high environmental sensitivity. And research out of Stony Brook University found that approximately 20% of people are born with a nervous system that processes stimuli more deeply than the other 80%. More data in, more analysis, more filtering, not more anxiety, more perception. That distinction is everything. Think about what that means in practice. While someone else is already 3 sentences into a story they haven't thought through yet, you've already clocked who in the room is performing, who is genuinely present, who is going to repeat what you say the moment you leave. You've assessed the emotional temperature. You've noticed the micro-expression that flashed across someone's face when a certain name was mentioned. You've done all of that, silently, automatically, before anyone even realizes you've been paying attention. And you're doing it because your brain is built to go deep, not wide. But here's where it gets painful. Because the world doesn't reward depth at first glance. The world rewards visibility. The world promotes the person who speaks first, loudest, most confidently, even if what they're saying is hollow. We live in a culture that has confused volume with value, output with intelligence, extroversion with leadership. So you've spent a lifetime watching louder people get the credit for ideas they half thought through, while you sat with fully formed thoughts you never said out loud because the room didn't feel right. That's not weakness. That's a calibration error between your wiring and the environment you were placed in. Now let me tell you something about trust, because this is the thing that almost no one understands about quiet people. You don't give it away. Most people offer trust as a default. They assume goodwill until they're proven wrong. They open up fast, they share early, they tell near strangers things that take years to earn. You don't operate that way. For you, trust is built through observation. It's built through watching how someone treats a waiter when they're in a bad mood, how they talk about people who aren't in the room, whether what they say on Monday still holds on Friday, whether they show up the same way whether you're useful to them or not. This isn't paranoia. This is pattern recognition. And it's one of the most accurate social tools a human being can possess. Research by psychologist Carl Marcy at Harvard Medical School found that the most meaningful social bonds aren't formed through volume of interaction. They're formed through quality of attunement, through genuinely being seen by another person, through the sense that someone is really listening, not just waiting for their turn to talk. You know what that feels like. You've been doing it your whole life. The problem is, most of the world doesn't offer that in return, so you stay quiet. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you've learned that not every space deserves what you carry. And now here's the part that might sting. Some of you didn't start this way. There was a version of you, younger, more open, less guarded, who used to fill rooms with energy, who had opinions and shared them, who laughed loud and talked fast and reached for connection without second-guessing it. And then something happened. Maybe it was gradual. Your words kept getting interrupted. Your ideas kept getting stolen, repackaged, and handed back to you with someone else's name on them. The things you shared in confidence became currency someone else spent. Or maybe it was one moment, one room, one person who responded to your openness with cruelty so casual they didn't even realize they were doing it. Either way, you made a decision. Just a slow internal rearrangement of where you put your energy. You didn't shut down, you just got strategic. Your silence isn't apathy. It's self-preservation built from lived experience. But here's what psychology wants you to hear. There is a difference between silence as strategy and silence as survival. Strategy is intelligent. Strategy is you reading the room and choosing not to waste signal on a broken receiver. Survival is when you've been burned so many times that you stop looking for the right receiver altogether. When the silence stops being a choice and becomes a cage. The question worth sitting with is, which one are you living in right now? Because there is something that happens to quiet people who go unwitnessed for too long. Their internal world grows so rich, so detailed, so fully inhabited, that the external world starts to feel irrelevant by comparison. Why bother trying to translate all of this into words for people who only hear the surface? And slowly, without meaning to, they start withdrawing from spaces they once would have stretched themselves for. This is not peace. This is the beginning of isolation dressed up as self-protection. Real peace doesn't require you to go smaller. Real peace is when your inner world finds the right external space, and when it does, you expand. Think about a time when you were with someone who made you feel genuinely safe. No judgment, no performance, no subtext, just two people actually present with each other. Did you stay quiet then? No, you talked. You might have surprised yourself. You said things you didn't even know you thought until they came out of your mouth. You laughed in a way that felt unguarded. You felt briefly, like the fullest version of yourself. That wasn't a different you. That was always you. That was the version of you that the wrong rooms buried. Psychologist Elaine Aron, who pioneered research on highly sensitive people, wrote that depth of processing isn't just about perception. It's about meaning. Quiet people don't just see more. They feel the weight of what they see. They sit with it. They turn it over. They don't let experience pass through them and disappear. They metabolize it. That is not a burden. That is a gift. But only if you stop treating it like something that needs to be hidden. Let me tell you what your silence communicates, whether you intended to or not. When you're in a room and you don't speak, people who are uncomfortable with themselves will project that discomfort onto you. They'll call you judgmental. They'll call you cold. They'll say you think you're better than everyone. What they're actually saying is, your stillness unsettles me. Because most people have never learned to be comfortable in silence. They've filled every quiet moment with noise since childhood because silence, for them, is where the uncomfortable thoughts live. Your ability to simply be, to not need to fill the air, is a mirror they didn't ask to look into. That is not your problem to solve. But here is something that is yours to own. When your words do land, when you finally speak after watching and listening and processing, they carry a different weight. People who know you know this. They go quiet when you start talking. They lean in because they've learned that when you decide something is worth saying, it usually is. That is a kind of social capital that cannot be manufactured. It cannot be faked. It is built through the consistent practice of saying less than you could and meaning every word you do say. So here is what I need you to hear before we end. Stop trying to be louder. Stop apologizing for the space your silence takes up. Stop performing extroversion for rooms that wouldn't even notice the performance. But also, stop letting that silence become a wall. Find your people. They exist. They are somewhere in a corner of a loud party, half listening to the conversation, watching the room, wondering if anyone else feels like an alien here. They are the ones who text instead of call, who remember the specific details of what you said 2 months ago, who don't need to fill every silence between you. When you find them, talk. Really talk. Give them the version of you that the wrong rooms never got to meet, because the world doesn't need you to be louder. It needs you to be placed correctly. A signal sent into the wrong frequency is just noise. But that same signal, aimed at the right receiver, that's how the most important conversations in history began. You were never broken. You were always just broadcasting on a frequency most people hadn't learned to tune into yet. And somewhere out there, someone is adjusting their dial right now, looking for exactly what you transmit. If this reached something in you, something you've never quite been able to put into words, then share it, not for the numbers. Because somewhere in your circle there is a quiet person who has spent years being misread, and they need to hear this today. And before you go, I want to know one thing. What is the one moment in your life when someone finally understood your silence? And what did that feel like? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one.